how to sculpt. Ooh, baby, how to sculpt.
Hi, I'm Mr. Pink, otherwise known as Modern Synthesist, and this is another video on how to sculpt Tyranids. This time we're going to be focusing on how to sculpt vents, which are one of the easily repeatable Tyranid structures that you can easily add to either fill up space on a Tyranid that you're sculpting or to convert a non-Tyranid limb into something that looks more Tyranid. So to get to that, first we need to find our good friend, Terry the Tyranid. So Tyranid vents, no big deal, right? You should be able to just go in here, slap a vent in there, no problem. One thing I want to note here is the biggest mistake that people make when sculpting is trying to do everything at once. You wouldn't expect to fully paint a miniature in one coat, and you similarly can't fully sculpt a miniature in one layer. For example, here's me trying to sculpt vents all in one go. It's tough, and the end product isn't great, so let's look at how to do it better. I'm going to show you two methods. One where you sculpt the ribbing inside the vent first, and then sculpt the window to surround it, and another one where you sculpt the window around it first, and then sculpt the detail of the vent in afterwards. Let's talk about where Tyranid vents go, because some people put them like everywhere. On legs, they only occur in the thigh. They occur on both the inner and the outer thigh, so that can get complicated doing them on the inner part. You can skip the inner thigh if it's not that exposed, or you just want to rush and get it done quick. For example, with Terry, this leg is kind of like shoved in his crotch. These legs are not perfectly Tyranid, so there's not a lot of room there to put a vent, but I've seen people put vents in the lower legs, not great. With the upper arms of Tyranids, the other place that vents occur, they occur both in the forearm, right there, and in the bicep. So one there and one there. And they have them in their hands as well. And of course, in their weapons. To do Tyranid vents is one of the easiest things to sculpt on Tyranids if you do it in two stages. So what you do is you get a sausage of green stuff, you get your leg, and you just take your sausage and you just stick it on the leg like that. And then you want to smooth it a bit, but you don't want to make it flat. You want it to still have a curve to it with like a highest point along the middle of the sausage and then sloping down on it on the top and bottom. So you just want to mesh the top. Again, this is not going to be very important because this is all going to be covered later. Do kind of like we did with the armor plates where we left the ridge down the middle. You do that here, but you want that ridge to be rounded, not triangular. So what you can do, you can start with a triangular one where you're pushing down the bottom part and then pushing down the top part and just kind of extending it along the leg. So follow the line of the leg with the line of the vent. I probably have too much putty here because this is getting fat here and it's getting like in the way of these. So what I'm just going to do is trim the front of this off. The best way to do this is like I did here. I did the vent first, then I would build up the surround on the vent, and then I would put the armor plates. But you can do it this way, so I'll show you how to do it this way. So I'm doing this, the interior part of the vent, smoothing out the front part, and just because what we're doing is we're sculpting the gills, the vent tissue, and then we're going to come and put a window around it after. So we don't want it to be too thick around the edges because we have to put more putty on there. So really the majority of it should be along this ridge in the middle, and everything else should be super flattened into the rest of the leg, the rest of the arm. You don't want it to be too raised here either. Although if we're making this guy a Tyranid, there's a clear delineation between the leg and then like the butt area, so it doesn't matter if it's too thick here because we should probably make this leg come up a bit more better defined. So yeah, you just make it rounded off. With that, you can look here, you can see that there's a ridge running down the middle there, kind of a bulge. And then you taper it at the kneeward part and the hipward part, kind of flush it back into the body. Same thing above and below. There we go. And then it literally is the easiest thing. You just take a knife tool, make sure it's well lubed up with Nivea, or it's just lubed at all. And then you just, what I did here is I just went along and go boop, 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 boop. One thing to notice, the sections are smaller towards the knee and towards the hip and thicker in the middle. You don't have to. You can make them all uniform, or you could make them like become thicker in the middle and then dwindle at the other end. So you got this lined up. You take your knife tool and make sure that it's at a 90-degree angle to the line of the ridge. These sections are a little big. You can make them closer together if you want. The first cuts are just to tell you where the breaks in the sections are, delineate them, and then what you want to do is better define the rings at the top and bottom. Think of these as like muscle rings that are going around the leg. So you're just extending the curve of them at the bottom as well. Because you got to sculpt that surround over top, you don't want them too bulgy down here. So if you're going to smooth it anywhere, you can smooth it at the edges. And that's basically it. So once you've got your vascular tissue sculpted, again, this is not perfect, but it just gives you an illustration like this. You get a sausage of green stuff, and then you get it pretty thin, and you split it in two. You take your first sausage, and you pick whether you want to do the top or the bottom of the leg, and you put it along the edge. We introduced that ridge running down the middle of the raised section. You want to put your sausages north and south of that ridge. because what you're doing is you're cutting out this window. Like it's a window in the leg that shows the gill structures showing through. We're defining that window. I mean, you can do them one at a time, or it might be helpful to have them both on there so you can kind of see what's showing through the window. I feel like it's kind of a gross analogy, but think of these as like lips, and then the gill structure inside is like the teeth showing through the lips. You just want to make sure that you have enough putty that it connects at the ends. Notice I'm not doing it on this side where I just sculpted them. I'm doing it on this side, which has been cured. Make sure it's good and stuck on this side by smoothing that into the leg, because you don't want it pulling like I just did there. Now this looks really weird at this point because it's sticking way out from the leg. As you add the armor plates here, you're gonna fix those levels. And you could also like sculpt up the leg a bit here, because like Tyranid legs on warriors are not flush with the torso. They sit out. That's an extreme example. If you look here, they don't go flush. They have that weird kind of like thing that goes in to the joint. So you can definitely bulk it up. Right now, we're just making sure that we're covering the extra parts of the ring that we don't want to show, and that we're defining this window opening around the gill structure. And you want there to be like a defined ridge along the gill structure, and then kind of like taper into the existing leg at the other end. You just kind of mesh the putty at the front here. Make sure there's enough there that it doesn't just like flatten into the gills. It's like peas in a pod, I guess. You sculpt the peas and then you sculpt the pea pod around them. The only thing you really got to worry about at this point is making a smooth seam between the two sausages, top and bottom. So that came out pretty well. I'd say that's a pretty good window. I don't need to do much work. If it gets a bit smeary or whatever, you can go in with the spoon tool and just lift up the window part a bit to better define the difference between that and the section inside. You can get your knife tool and you can go in like that and lift it slightly to make sure there's that separation. What you want to make sure is that as you're doing that, the lip is going to raise more and more away from what's inside, and you don't want that to be too high. So then you come with your spoon tool and just kind of like, don't push too hard, smooth it down along there to make it closer to the level of what's inside. If you do that too much, it'll start closing the window, so be aware of that. But if your windows are too wide, too gapey, and you want to make it a thinner opening, like that's a very thin opening on the warrior leg, an easy way to do that is from above, just like smooth it like this. And it'll naturally start to push the top level further down the rings. Don't do it too much because it'll close, and don't do it too close to the edge because it'll flatten this into the rings. But from the back, you can just kind of like smooth it down that way. And then you can do the same thing on the other side because that ridge is a little high. While you're doing this, a key part of the design, there's a very clear tapering at the front and the back of this window. So you don't want it to be like really bulgy here. In fact, you could even go in with your knife tool and just extend this a bit to make it more of a taper at the end. That's something to watch for in terms of style. First step, go in, sculpt the gill structure. If you want to get bonus points and you're a real pro star and you made them too thick, you can go and introduce a suggestion of a ridge in the middle of each section. That is hairy work, but you can do it. You want more detail in there. You want to go for that Forge World level detail. Just doing the first part is more than enough, especially in smaller sections. Like this is a slightly larger section, but in smaller ones, not going to be as noticeable. There we go. Got that Forge World level detail there. How do you like that? So do this, let it dry, and then once it's dry, come back, get your 2 sausages of green stuff and seal those puppies in. So we're running out of space on this guy. Tyranids don't have vents on these parts of their legs. So I'm going to pretend there's a vent here up on his ribs. Not something that happens on Tyranids, but whatever. Just for the purposes of showing you another way to do this. You can sculpt the ribs first and then you can sculpt the surround, or you can sculpt the surround first and then add the ribs in. So I'm going to sculpt the surround here, and I'm just making that same cat's eye shape that we have down here. I'm just going to hollow out the middle. Key thing here is to make sure it's blending into the body all around if you're going to do the surround first, because you don't want to have to come back and like remesh it with the body beneath. So yeah, you get that rough cat eye shape, and then just cut a hole in the middle of it, make a gap. And you want to leave the gap, have that same shape in it, pinch the ends. We did on the other one. The key thing, if you want to do it this way, you can sculpt these first, and then you can let this dry before you go back in. The other option you can do is, here's another creature that I'm working on that has non-Tyranid legs. What you can see here is that I did the thing where I sculpted the ribs in first, but I also like carved into the leg there to make a depression so that this didn't stick up too much. I'm still gonna have to go in and sculpt a surround, but it won't be quite as prominent as like putting these things on top of the leg and sculpting a thing on top. It makes the legs much larger. So that's one option. What we're gonna do here is we've got the vent structure there. We just have to fill in the vascular structure that goes inside. So the key now is to let this thing fully cure and then go back in and add this structure.
3 hours later.
Oh, look, we're back. Now it's fully hardened. Time to sculpt in the detail. What I'm doing here is I'm just filling that void that we left. Again, this void is fully cured now, and just kind of filling in the area that we're going to use to sculpt the ribs. Saw me remove some putty there because I had too much putty in it. That's the challenge of doing this method, that you could wind up with it kind of overstuffed. Now I'm just defining the ridge that runs down the middle that I'm going to be putting the ribs into, and then I just hit it with the silicone shaper there, and you can see it kind of flattens out a bit, but not all the way to the edges. I want to leave that gap around the edges to define the space between the vascular tissue inside and that surrounding part that we sculpted earlier and let set. So I'm just kind of obsessing with that and getting a clean, again, that whole cat eye shape that we keep coming back to, oblong almond shape. So just get that defined, and then I'm just going in and I'm cutting in the ridges into that vascular tissue there. I'll probably go in and just clean up the sides a bit. I wouldn't say that there's any benefit to sculpting it this way, but if you're more comfortable with being able to define the vent and then fill it, this is another option for you. So that's been how to sculpt Tyranid vents. Hopefully you found this helpful. They're a really great way to just Tyraniddify various limbs on other critters like we're doing here. Still, there's a couple more things to be done to this critter's limbs before it looks proper Tyranid, so look forward to that in the next How to Sculpt Tyranids video. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment and let me know what you thought. And of course, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, or you enjoy my other videos, consider supporting me on Patreon. It really helps a lot to get these videos out quicker. That's all for now. Thanks a lot. Look forward to sculpting with you soon.